Hi, and welcome to another episode of Celebrating Small Family Businesses. Today we are celebrating David and Lisa Osk from Tennessee, I believe. And rather than name one company, because David's got many irons in the fire, we're just gonna get into it. So, hi, David. Hi, Lisa. Welcome.
Hi. Glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
So, what I think I saw first, like your biggest piece, is something that I've seen many times in my life and thought I want one of those, and it's a device that goes over thermostats to keep people from messing with them. Right? Tell me
You're
about
right.
tell me about that.
Okay, so, long story short, I was actually in facilities management with a large telecom chain for about 17 years. And of course, in our retail stores and call centers and so on, we would use thermostat, guards or thermostat covers, whatever you want to call them. It's everybody gets the thermostat wars, right? It doesn't matter if it's your office or house, everybody's messing around with the thermostat. The issue though is nobody yeah, that's right, pointing fingers. But everybody has a hard time keeping up with those tiny keys. And so,
Hmm.
long story short, technically the invention was my brother-in-law's idea. He called me one day and he said, hey David, where do I get a stat guard with the combo lock? He said, people are just losing these keys left and right. Well, he and I, of course, started looking for a stat guard with a combo lock because I knew immediately, because I had a portfolio of 150 stores that I was, kind of looking after, and we used them everywhere. I mean, some of our, locations would have 20 thermostat guards in them, depending on the,
Wow.
the size of the call center or whatnot, or a retail store might be two or three, and we couldn't find anybody who made one. So technically, we were the first ones in the world to have a stat guard with a combo lock, and it's been this 10-year overnight success thing, right? So Lisa and I ended up buying him out a few years after we started the company, and fast forward, we're in about 3,700 retail stores and counting. So we're pretty excited to have been the kind of accidental entrepreneurs. And of course, when you get a couple of wins, right, it starts to open up your imagination as to what's possible. So now we're into all sorts of things. So
Wonderful. So, how do your roles? How do you how do your strengths fall, and how do you separate your roles?
Yeah, so David is always the idea guy, the dreamer, the big picture, 30,000 view kind of guy. And I am, like my grandmother always used to describe her husband, I'm holding on to a balloon that's up in the air, and so I keeping things
totally.
grounded. I'm the details, the numbers, the administrative type of person, and that just fits my personality. So really our roles are pretty separate, but necessary. And so we really work well together because we're not crossing over into each other's territory. We let each other use their gifts really to the fullest, and it's
Yeah,
really
and
been a good play.
absolutely. And it's so interesting. I look back and I really wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, without Lisa's help. I mean, from day one, I mean, I am such a big idea person. I love ideas. I love sales. I love people. But I remember, remember that first season when we got into HomeDepot.com. Just the onboarding process to me was like going to Mars. You start looking at all the data that they're asking, not only just the nomenclature around the product that you're going to be putting on their site and insurance requirements, and I mean, you name it, all that stuff. I start looking at it. I'm like, I'm out. I wouldn't do it unless I had somebody, sitting in that seat that could really help me, walk down that path.
Yeah.
Outstanding. We can relate.
Yeah. And we're just the opposite.
We
I'm the 30,000-foot girl, and he's the one sitting there going, yeah, I can put in my shoe size.
I'm the
Yeah.
detail.
That's not a problem. And I'm going, oh, no, I'm out.
It's kind of a
Right.
love-hate thing with the details for me, but because I can do it, but depending on the level of it, it gets wearing.
I
Right.
agree with that 100%. There are moments where we have to find experts that can help us, and the two of us together, between the ideas and the Excel spreadsheets, we can come together, especially, but we're always learning, which is another thing. We are very open to learning and being
Yeah.
educated on how to do things. So.
Yeah.
Huge key.
Yeah.
Huge key. So, did you guys, were you well into your married life when this opportunity came up? Had you already figured all this out, or was it?
Yeah, we had been married about 15 years. So technically, my company is Quorum Global, and we probably started the company maybe 12 or 13 years ago, but largely the first season was a hobby,
Mm-hmm.
and but yeah, we had been married at least 10 years,
Yeah. The
maybe
children were
more.
young, I recall,
Yeah,
when the Stat Guard came out, and we didn't have really any idea kind of really what or how to market it, what to do with it. So a lot of that, he started getting ideas for, and we were able to push forward. But I was kind of raising the toddlers and kind of in that young stage. So
yeah.
that manifested
And
into a company.
it was interesting too. I think those early years, I'm sure your listeners can relate if they have a similar story in any way. It's, obviously being new parents at the time, just that alone can be really, really overwhelming. But here we are, not just trying to operate a lemonade stand on the corner, right? We're wanting to distribute product in 50 states, understand everything from plastics injection molding to supply chain management, to cash flow and everything else. And I remember those first few years being really overwhelming. It was really hard just to keep day after day, just keep pressing in.
Oh, I can only
And it
imagine.
was a little while before it became a full-time
Yeah.
gig. So he was working at the retail, full-time for a while. So, it was a transition. It wasn't all at once. So there was some security that we had, and that we had
Right.
our jobs. And that gave us opportunity to get legs on the other
Yeah.
career before we got that fully up and going.
That's great. Yeah. It's a very different journey when you have to take a leap of faith and just, cut off the paycheck and now what?
Exactly.
Yeah. Nailed
Exactly.
it. Yeah.
So what do you love best about working with family? That's one of our favorite questions.
I'll jump into the deep end of the pool here. I think it's what's fascinating is neither Lisa and I like conflict. And, you might imagine, right? When you get married, you're not necessarily thinking about your partner, being literally a partner, right? Like, so Lisa and I just celebrated 25 years, and there's no question. Thank you. There's no question that, opposites attract, and, we definitely, kind of stand in the gap, in each other's, stead in certain areas and so on. But I think that, we've really had to learn how to communicate better. For a long time, I would, treat Lisa like I would a colleague in business. She'd be in her office. We work at home here. She would be in her office, and I'd walk in and say, "Hey, we need to send a purchase order to so-and-so. Can you take care of that?" And I'd walk out. And, it was one of those things where I think she was like, "Okay, yes,
Boss.
yeah, hey, sweetheart, like, and you can speak to this, but yeah, you're my husband, not my boss. Be careful, how you kind of walk into my room, as it were, metaphorically." And I think a lot of times I was, just kind of had tunnel vision, didn't really think about how, to work with you, in a way that was just different. And it is different. You can't treat each other, the same as you would treat an employee or even a partner for that matter.
Yeah, certainly there's a learning curve. We had to learn things that we do well together and things that we don't, and learn when we go outside and find other resources. Like we learned early on that I can't make a video with him when he has an idea in his head and I'm videoing, and my ideas and opinions might not, and it takes a long time, and there's some emotions, and it sometimes it's not real pretty. So we've learned early on that that's not something that we do together. Now there are many things that we do together, and we do great together. But we learned that wasn't one of them. And then another thing that we got to learn, which I think is one of the fun things about working with a partner or family, is getting to know what you do well together and how to thrive and shine. And so I learned also that he has a group of men that he really bounces ideas off of, and for him to start there, bounce those ideas off, and then come to me, that's really beneficial for me, and that I don't get more information than I can handle on a given day when I'm raising the kids and homeschooling the children. And I also have a job that I really enjoy, that gives me fulfillment in different ways than selling thermostat guards. So it's it's interesting kind of learning about each other that way. But one thing that's really fun about family is working, especially in this entrepreneurial type of thing, as we're raising the children, especially through homeschool. They have watched what entrepreneurship looks like, and they have looked at what kind of career they may want in the future. And so it's been really cool. My son is a natural salesperson, marketing kind of guy. He's in college for that presently. And I don't know that he would have quite understood what kind of having your own business and the ups and downs of that might look like if he would have had to learn through a different route.
Yeah.
And my daughter already says, I don't really want to work for a person. I would like to kind of have my own job. So that's been interesting to watch how it kind of trickles down on the children.
Well, it's neat to, you mentioned a couple things here. So our daughter is 17 and she's a violinist, and she actually, has been giving lessons for over a year now.
Yeah.
And she runs a pretty significant business. She's making more money, at 17 years old than a lot of young people at 17 that are working, 3 or 4 times as many hours. She's a first chair violinist at Vanderbilt Children's Orchestra. She's amazing. And real quick, you mentioned the group of entrepreneurs that I hang out with. So about 6 years ago, I joined the Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind. And what's fascinating is you've heard that phrase, you don't know what you don't know. And well, right out of the gate, I started hanging out with men who, ran businesses, and it's ISI is 150 or so men from, I think it's 6 different countries. And of course, they all operate differently. And some of them, if you ask them about working with your family or spouse, like they're just like, not a chance. And so largely, Lisa and I, when we started working together, I'll be honest, I don't think we planned this. It was more out of necessity. And I think I was like, hey, I can't do this, and I really need your help. I need your skill set. So 2 things kind of emerged at that point. I saw Lisa operate in other capacities, which of course I was really drawn to. One of the reasons I, married her. But then to see her operate in a professional capacity, was really, really intriguing to me. And to see her strengths really rise to the top, probably to a fault, caused me to, want to lean on her even more, because I was so impressed with the way, her analytical ability, everything from communicating to organizational skills was, just top notch. And so here's what's fascinating. As the business has grown and we have literally a bit more, financial margin, we've outsourced some things, right? We've got an accountant and, a bookkeeper that helps us, day to day, that kind of thing. And so largely, I think as the business is growing, we're working together less and less. But I think that's kind of by design as well. I'm one who I love this phrase, and I forget what book it came from, where the author was talking about working on your business and not in it. So what we did initially, and this is one delineation that I think I didn't understand early on, was just because you own a business does not mean you're an entrepreneur. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people who start a business, they just have a job. They created another job for themselves. And I think that what's really fascinating is when you get to the point of where you can work on your business and not in it, to some degree, well, it's amazing what opens up in your mind as to what's possible. And, you can, like you mentioned, the irons in the fire, you can, bring in some, other revenue streams, maybe work on something you're, kind of passionate about, that kind of thing. So I think by design, we're actually working together less and less, as the business has given us the ability to do that.
But we're able to really tackle some hard things, which I think is great. Things like we're not afraid to kind of go into territory that's unfamiliar or unknown because we've done it. And there's just something so marvelous of being able to do that, because those types of learning and communication goals really go out into all aspects of our lives, not necessarily in the business or entrepreneurial world. And so that's a really exciting thing as well. So I like working with him. He's my best friend. We've just had a really happy, joyful marriage. And so it's fun, and it's exciting to watch how the business grows and how we kind of have some control over that. And it's given us some freedom to be able to travel or do some things that maybe we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So, and I just feel the confidence going forward that if we're not always selling thermostat guards, there's going to be something that we're doing together, and it's going to be special.
There's so much there. Oh my goodness. So you answered one. My typical next question is something, a challenge that you've overcome together, and you mentioned that with the video. That you figured out that particular process just didn't work for the two of you guys, and so you'd find a way around. Gosh, what else did you? I just feel like we need to tease some things out.
Is just amazing here, and don't you think that's the bedrock of it all?
Yeah.
I work really closely with one of my ISI mastermind brothers, a guy named Dr. Andy Garrett. He's a clinical psychologist out in California, and he uses the term psychological safety, which is nothing new really. But I think what's fascinating is there's a lot of things that we did not do right, on the outset, and a lot of it was we were younger, we were just kind of operating every single day in the unknown, and it was kind of scary and new, and we were by no means starting fires, right? I like that phrase. I want to be a man who starts fires, not just puts out fires. But guess what? We were putting out fires every single day and did for years, just trying to figure out some of the most mundane tasks and so on. But I think that one of the things that that I've never doubted from my wife is her dedication to me and her love for me and her respect for me. And I hope that I've always, shown that same, type of admiration and love and kindness. I mean, the psychological safety in any relationship is paramount. And it's amazing how things can disintegrate, so quickly, when someone, doesn't feel heard, when they don't feel respected and that kind of thing. It's not that we've done it, even pretty. But at the same time, there's not been I can count on one hand probably the number of times we've gone to bed angry, that kind of thing. And we both of us love harmony. We don't like conflict, and we also have been able to stand on some pretty big shoulders and learn how to navigate some of those waters. And
even back to our marriage, the best advice that we got was that just remember you're on the same team. And so we have been Team OSC for 25 years. Anything that you'll ever hear about us as a family, that's what we always say. We're on the same team. And so
we even have shirts.
We have shirts that say
OSC.
Team OSC. And so
we have our own logo, in fact.
Cute.
That's so cool.
Here, but yeah.
So you have to trust your teammates, and you have to be able to depend on them, and you have to be able to forgive them and move forward and learn and grow. And I think that's strengthened us in many ways, even outside of the workplace.
Well, so another thing that I wanted to bring out, I'm rewinding quite a bit, but you guys were talking about, figuring out the communication as work colleagues who are spouses. And, that you had to you couldn't use your straight corporate, like, can you take care of this? Yeah. Oh my goodness, I can remember my dad saying, "Yeah, can you handle this?" But at the same time,
No.
there's a tone there. That you what I heard was it had to do mostly with kind of approach and tone, and yet in other family businesses, especially when there's two generations, a lot of times they've got to figure out how to separate the family kind of the other way and get the family more out of it. And so we were talking to the father-daughter that we mentioned, now are in different countries, but the son came into the business, and day one he started calling his dad by his first name instead of by dad, because they had a whole team of people that had already been there.
Yeah.
And the father said, "Whoa." And then he realized quickly, no, that's appropriate. That's, that's clarifying the roles in this context.
Yeah.
Right? And it sounds like you guys really, you found a different aspect of it, but you almost had to come at it from the other direction, which is really cool.
Right.
I think the pendulum kind of swings, depending on the day or week or, whatever's going on. But I think, again, like anything else, when you don't give up, we've just kind of learned each other's tempos. We learn kind of, what the temperature is going on. We just try to show each other a lot of grace. Yeah. And Lisa's always the one having to show me grace. In fact, it's usually very one-sided because I get my, my mind set on something, and I'm not thinking of, I I think maybe this is more of a man type thing, but I have a hard time like multitasking and thinking about several things at one time. So if I'm thinking about, hey, we need to, order this or ship this over here, that's the only thing I'm thinking about, when she's able to think about 9,000 things at the same time. And some of them are, very personal or something like that. And I find that I have to compartmentalize to kind of keep focused on some things. But my point is that we've kind of learned to,
Yeah.
Again, a lot of grace. We just understand, where is the other one today? And then sometimes, you've even done this too. I'll walk into your office and, she'll say something like, hey, why don't you go back out there and come back in and try that again? And just smile at me or something like that. That's, that I'm like, ooh, where she could have justifiably, like snapped my head off because I was acting like a total jerk. But again,
That feels like much.
but you're good at that though. I mean, it's
managing expectations. It's
Yeah.
saying, I know that this seems very urgent on your moment. You need this right now, but I'm in the middle of something that I can't stop. So if I have 2 hours to get this job done, let's come back and I'll have it done for you by that time period. Or if you see that I have forgotten something after I've committed to you, you need to, kindly remind me, hey, did you have a chance to look at that? And so it's just managing expectations, being respectful of each other's times and jobs, just like even in a corporate world, there's expectations that have to be met and timelines. And so, the comfort of being a spouse and being able to ask for whatever and however, and that kind of thing. Sometimes the corporate side of it really has to come in, and you have to, manage that diligently.
Yeah.
Yes, that you just touched on one of the aspects that's, I think, common in family situations or with family dynamics in the workplace is the family generally, there's a tendency to kind of lower our the standards of how we treat other people, right? We just sort of take for granted because they're family. I can relax a little bit on the politeness or whatever, and that rarely goes well, but it's so common.
Yeah.
And that an emergency on your part is not an emergency on my part.
Amen, sister.
I can't tell you how many times we have had that conversation.
There was what was it? I want to say there was a repair. It was like the service depot sign. So lack of preparation on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. That's another version of it.
Yeah.
Very true.
I wanted to ask: is there so you guys have mentioned a couple of times about that how you handle where there's a misalignment in communication or there's a managing expectations. Is there a particular technique or little trick that you've learned in your language or in your approach that you could share that other people might be able to draw from that has helped you with those situations?
I'll just start this way. If you're working with your spouse, y'all get it. It can be incredibly personal. Mm-hmm. And so here's what's interesting. I think there's emotional capital, that you would, kind of store up, as it were, right? Each of you has kind of a tank. And I tell you what, when I feel like I'm, being heard and respected and all that kind of stuff, and I think the same is true for Lisa, it's amazing how just that alone will inform how, we're going to handle conflict. So one of the things that I try to do that I didn't do really well in the past is, hey, do you have a minute? Right. As opposed to, do me a favor and send this out. Like I'm, talking to, a secretary or something like that. And so, just to be a bit more, conscious that they probably have other things that are more pressing in their mind as to, my needs right now. So to enter into those conversations, hopefully more often with a question, as opposed to, the job or the task at hand is, has to be done immediately, that kind of thing. So I think that emotional capital, that psychological safety, the tank, as it were, it's amazing when that tank is full or fuller anyway. Boy, it goes a long way. You really want to maintain that harmony as opposed to just solve a problem, as it were. I'll get really deep here for just a second. I read a book a while back where the guy said that, relationships are the point of life, period. that relationships, right, that love, that the human connection is the summum bonum. It's the highest good. It's the absolute point of life, period. The rest of it is a context. And I mean, the more I've kind of, thought about that, I'm like, it makes sense, right? Everything would be really meaningless if I was standing here alone. I don't care if you're standing in front of the Grand Canyon or the Mona Lisa or listening to a beautiful song. We're so wired, to say, hey, come here and listen to this, or especially when we're kids, right? Dad, you gotta smell this, you gotta taste this, or whatever that is. We're so wired for relationships. So my point though is that, if I keep that, front and center, right? The rest of this stuff, again, it's a context, and yes, it matters. But if I really, try to prioritize the fact that, everybody that I'm interacting with is precious, and whether that's Lisa or anybody else, it really starts to shift, this idea of human doing versus human being, and it really solves a lot of problems. But guess what? When stress starts to hit, when cortisol starts rising, adrenaline starts rising, fear starts rising, we immediately, just our primal, our prefrontal cortex, or no, it's our lizard brain. We want to,
the limbic system kicks in.
we want to solve those problems immediately, and we often, lose sight of what's most precious in this world. And of course, that's my sweetheart here, right? And
Well, and to put some legs on that too, just like we talked earlier about how he's the idea man and I'm the detailed girl, there's that saying that we operate differently. We are made up differently. And we did a few of those personality tests and that type of thing. Pick whichever one you like. We've probably done it because we find that interesting. We like to kind of know how we fit and whatnot.
yeah,
Strengths Finder, Enneagram,
Yeah.
whatever they are. We've enjoyed
We have
getting to
too.
know- Wonderful.
We
Yeah.
love those things.
I know. And so when I learned about David, the very first one we took was earlier in our marriage. And one of his highest strengths was woo, and which was people, going out of his way.
Right.
Like he is feeding on people and gets energy that way. And I always just thought that was kind of weird. I was like, dang, he just needs to calm down a little bit. But when I learned that that's what gives him his energy and strength, and, I've learned to go, okay, there's nothing wrong with that, even though I don't operate out of that. He does, and it feeds him and fuels him. And so to learn not just that, he can go into a room and just feed off the energy of other people, but to learn the things that make him tick and the things that bring him joy and that give him strength. And those things I've learned to love and appreciate about him instead of finding weird and kind of wishing he would stop. And I'm sure there are the same things that, on the other side, there are things where I'm sure he's thinking the same types of things about me. But to really get to know how he ticks, how he works, how he operates, and let him operate out of those strengths gives me permission to step back and sit in my, as a word he always says, zone of genius, where this is what I do, this is how I operate, this is how I do really well, and to learn how to do that together and be really excited for the other person that they are doing what they were created to do. And so I really feel like that has been a significant growth point in our marriage,
Oh,
and
it's
probably the
huge.
last 5 to 10 years. Like,
Yeah.
I've never been one to want to read a lot of self-help books or that kind of thing, but learning about our identities and how we work and where we get our strength and our fuel has really made a huge impact on how we communicate, how we talk, how we look at each other, and to really have language to put into our conversations when trying to address those types of
And
things.
I think what's really neat too is that, again, back to the human component, which I'm so wired for. That's so front and center with me. Today I had a conversation, by the way, with a customer who called, and one of my stat guards, wasn't working when it arrived. And I'm like, oh, I said, you've come to the right place. I'm actually the owner of the company. And we ended up talking for about 20 minutes, and her husband was in the room, and they've got 4 boys and 10 grandchildren. And we just had a really great conversation. But isn't it funny though, that it started around a thermostat guard? Lisa is, not that you don't love people, that kind of thing, but she's, like, oh, there's a problem. We have a really great customer. I want to make sure they're happy. Well, I'm going to turn them into the best friend I've ever had. I love people. Like I've never met a stranger, and, we're so different. So to not only to identify, right, identity, those things that make one another rise up, light up, and tick, but to honor that, to it's like you're then giving your spouse or anybody else, permission, as it were, just to be themselves, to be, fully themselves. And I think that's again, back to that psychological safety component, that is incredibly life-giving. It gives, when someone knows that you see them, right? You really see them, and you're giving them permission to, just to live fully alive, right? It's, God, what a gift.
And in full transparency, it sounds like we read the book and we are fully embraced. That was a learning curve. I mean, we
absolutely.
Thank you.
we had moments when
Absolutely.
we didn't do that really great, but being able to pause for a minute when I'm about to snap it, or say something I'm going to regret. Now I have the wisdom and the wherewithal to go, that didn't work well last time I did that. So this time, let me kind of take a minute and do this well so that we can move forward. And so I would say that that's years, maybe even a decade in process of learning. And
Absolutely.
I still gripe at him sometimes, maybe more than sometimes, so we
And
have
isn't it
conversations a lot.
10-year overnight
Right.
success thing you mentioned.
Right.
Right.
And isn't it fun to watch each other grow?
It is.
I mean, you're not the same people that you were 25 years ago. You're not even the same people you were 5 years ago, or maybe even a year ago. But isn't it fun to see the growth and to see somebody light up when maybe there was a little darkness there?
Yeah.
And
Well
isn't
said.
that just, that's a joy.
It's fabulous.
Well
It
said.
is. It is.
Yeah, and I came from a background of, my mother in particular, she just wanted like everything really certain. And like she'd put the furniture in one place and it'd stay there for 20 years. Connie rearranges the furniture, every 6 months.
Or less.
But so I came into the relationship expecting that the person that I met and that I fell in love with was going to be the same person for the next 40 years. And imagine
Was he
my
surprised?
surprise when I found out, I looked over one day and I'm talking to a very different person. And I really had to adjust.
That's funny you say that, because when I first got married, I thought I was going to be a domestic goddess. I was going to have the meals, on the table from the get-go. All the laundry was always going to be folded. I was going to have the house of my dreams. And I learned about 2 days into the marriage that was a gross mistake, that's not who I am. And so I even surprised myself. So we learn about ourselves along the journey.
I don't
Absolutely.
like doing it either.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you're not the same person you were.
No.
And isn't it fun to see different aspects of yourself coming out at different times?
It is.
And we were fortunate when we moved cross country, we got rid of everything.
Cool.
I mean, down
That's
to,
good.
well, we kept clothes and a couple of things, but we started over with new furniture, new plates, new all of that. And because our taste had changed.
Yeah.
And
Good
it
for
was
you.
so fun to do that. I wish I could do that every 10 years.
Well, yeah, we had a house full of hand-me-down furniture that we'd collected over the years. My grandmother moved out of a place, and so we got a couple of pieces
Right.
from there, and then my
Which
parents
was fine.
got some
It
new
was
furniture.
lovely.
So we got it was all nice furniture, but it was somebody else's that we just took on.
Yeah.
and
It wasn't
with
ours.
exception of one or two, and we kind of had a love for antiques because that was in the thing too, and. Yeah, we don't necessarily love antiques all that much. It was just kind of programming. So
Right.
we learned so much from that change.
Mm-hmm.
And
great.
it's one of the great paradoxes of life for me is that we resist change so, as humans, we just resist it so steadfastly, and yet it's constant. It's just like
Right.
it's never ending.
That's right. It happens
Yeah.
all the time. You're in constant state of flux
Yes.
So
and a constant state of growth. Isn't it great?
We've grown to appreciate it
Absolutely.
and be
I'm-
really thankful for it even.
Yeah,
Right.
there are some things, of course, like you mentioned, just change is hard. And I think, in general, I think most humans are, resistant in some ways. At the same time, that when change is a choice and, you're really wanting to grow and expand, especially from a place of, values and creativity and things like that, it can be incredibly exciting, when you have that sense of, agency, like this is the person that I'm becoming, and I want to express myself in these particular ways. It's really empowering.
And when you're willing to do that with your spouse, it really makes the changes that you don't plan for that come up, because it seems like most of the changes happen that way. It's not this frightening thing as much as it is just learning the tools that you've been working on for so long, and appreciating and realizing who we are and how we work together, that give us the opportunities to really be able to take change with grace.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go back to that foundation of
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is this person's nature, this is this person's nature, these are their strengths. Now, how do we leverage everybody's strengths? And
Yeah.
that, I mean, whether it's 2 of you or 20 people in the business, the real magic happens when the business owner recognizes, tries to get the right people in the right seats, right?
Yeah.
Rather than, somebody may have a skill. So one of the things that we've, relative to the Clifton strengths, was another thing of various skills, and I can't remember the 4 categories off the top of my head, but you've got your energized skills. You've got things that you're good at and you like to do. You got things that you're good at but you don't like to do, and then you got things that you're not good at and you don't like to do. So those are just off the table, right? Nobody'd ask you to do that. But the things that you're good at and you don't like to do, they drain you. But sometimes people get put in a seat because they're hired for a particular skill.
Yeah.
And they're put in a seat doing that, and it's this struggle to come to work every day.
Soul sucking.
It's soul sucking, yeah. And so
I'll
when you can find that, I like it and I'm good at it, and put somebody in that, now you've got a powerhouse.
I'll chime in on that. So, Lisa mentioned that phrase, the zone of genius, which came from the Gay Hendricks book, The Big Leap. And, he talks in the book, he talks about what you just said. There's a zone of competence, that most people, stop at. And it's this idea of, okay, I can do this really, really well. I might not, love it, but it's this safe place, where your zone of genius, his coined term there it's that intersection of, what is it that gives me goosebumps, and I'm really, really good at it. The hard part is most people don't get there. And I feel like I just turned 50 2 months ago, and I feel like I'm heading into that phase of my life here. But what's interesting about stepping into that top 10% of who you are and operating in that space, it's a little bit scary, because what if I put myself out there like this and it's not received well? Or what if I spend all of this time learning and growing in this area, but I realized I just was missing some information, and I kind of, lacked, the outcome that I was desiring, and now I've got to pivot or start over or things. There's so much uncertainty around, being, that type of a person. Or how about this? My buddy Quentin Hafner is a coach and author and so on. He wrote a book recently called Go Next Level. It's really, really great. But, he talks about, just this idea of answering the questions, like for that top 10%, what is it that lights you up? And I like to say, what is it that gives your goosebumps? He said, what is it that breaks your heart? And what is it that, infuriates you? And so when you start getting clear on some of that stuff, your really unique sense of purpose starts rising up. Like this idea of, passion, it comes from the word passion comes from the word suffer. What am I willing to suffer for here? And it's an interesting thing when you start aligning this idea of passion suffering with, this, man, I'm really, really great at this. And when I think about stepping out in this area or putting forth this type of a message or music or art or, whatever that might be, or product, if it scares you just a little bit, you're probably on the right path.
Exactly.
I just got goosebumps right now. 'Cause I just realized what you were saying was, that thing of, because you care so much about it, because you're passionate about it, that risk of taking it, that somehow you might lose that passion or fall short of that is the scary part.
Yeah, I'm writing a book right now called The Guardians of Grit, and it's a book for fathers and sons. I'm really niching down to just men and their boys, and it's funny. Here I am writing a book about grit, right? And I'm having to dig deep in order to accomplish this, because there's a headwind, right? There's a headwind against, this internal, and I think very cosmic headwind that's pushing against this mission, because it's what I believe, right? What am I willing to suffer for? What am I passionate about? I believe it's the most needed mission, period. And this is, again, one point of view here, but I think it's the most needed mission. So therefore, the resistance and just the, my own internal narrative that I have to conquer to become the person to do this is really difficult. But again, I feel like I'm on the right path because I'm scared, I can't stop thinking about it. I definitely have a skill set for it, and I'm willing to suffer, to see the outcome, produced.
Yeah.
So yes, you are on the right path.
Wow.
That's the definition of path right there. Follow that yellow brick road.
Yeah. Yeah.
No matter what you're going to encounter on that road, and there's going to be a lot of encounters.
Lions and tigers and bears. Oh, wow.
Bye. Exactly. But look at how much fun you're going to have with that. And look at the joy that you're also going to bring to other people. And that's by sharing that.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good job. Can't wait to read it when you get it. Even though I'm not a father and even though I'm not a man. How about that? Or a boy.
You're gonna. What's interesting is, of course, I use the term guardian, in the book, and really, I'm niching down to fathers and sons because I think it's going to be something that's really easily grabbed onto, But at the same time, what's a guardian, right? It's anybody who is in an authority position over a younger person, whether you're a mentor, a coach, a mom, a dad, an uncle, an aunt, a pastor. I mean, you name it. And I think in our society we have, a lot of people faltering. I mean, a lot of people that are just, for lack of a better phrase, they're not winning, and it's heartbreaking. And so this idea of grit and doing something difficult over a long period of time, right? The definition of grit, because what's on the other side of that hill is worth fighting for. And quite often people, they lack that horsepower because they just don't believe in themselves. They don't believe they have what it takes. Therefore, they're not even willing to let themselves dream about what's possible. So they kind of just, life happens by accident, and they, fall into, kind of a, kind of a rut, really. It's a life.
Reacting.
Yeah, good word. And it's, as opposed to, I know who I am. I know what's worth fighting for. Or the tools that are in my belt, or the paintbrushes maybe is a better analogy. And I'm going to paint this particular picture because it seems, really, really exciting to me.
Well, it also goes back to what we were talking about in the very beginning. We were talking about relationships being the core of everything.
Yeah.
And that's what that is. And this relationship, whether it's, to whatever it is, another human being, it's making that contact.
Yeah.
And that's the important part.
And we talk about relationships so much in terms of, two people, but we also have a relationship with ourselves. And that really is to be nurtured. And I think that's very relevant to what you're talking about, the father-son, is that, helping nurture that self-trust and self-belief that
It's a big deal.
I'm thinking about one of the folks we interviewed. He was saying, kind of my definition of entrepreneurship is most of us, if somebody said, run 100 yards, there's the goalpost, run to that as fast as you can. Most people would do that if, to accomplish whatever goal they were after. And then if somebody said, well, run a mile, a few people would fall away, but, still, it's achievable. And most people would see it as achievable. He said, with entrepreneurship, it's like somebody tells you to just start running in that direction, and you don't know where the end is.
Because there really isn't an end.
I don't think he'd mind. Chris Farrell of Alternative Transportation Systems was the guy that did that. He's I told him I was stealing it, so I want to spread that. I think it's beautiful.
Genius, it is, and experientially, you feel like that. You're like, there's no destination, and I remember when we, kind of started to really hit our stride. COVID hit, right? So nothing new here. Think of the millions of people that lost their businesses. And of course, we thought we were next. We couldn't even get inventory. It was sitting out on a container ship at the coast of, California, and we couldn't even get, product. And so for a long time, I thought, man, we're sunk here. No pun intended. And, but, it was interesting. We made it through, ended up, at that point we were in Home Depot, and then we got into Lowe's just after COVID, about maybe 9 months after COVID started letting up. And, you kind of have these moments in your business where you want to exhale, and you might. And then all of a sudden, here's another curveball, and here's another curveball. And so I think that, part of my journey is, and Lisa mentioned this earlier, it's this idea of expectations and change. I mean, if there's one thing you can count on, things are going to change, and it might not be, in the direction that you want. And quite often it's not. I'll mention Dr. Andy again. He said after people work with him, and I actually coach people through his program, the True North Blueprint. By the end of it, he said, David, and this is when he and I were just kind of talking personally. He said, David, by the end of the program, when we introduce people to themselves, he said, I want them to be able to look in the mirror in the face of an obstacle and just say, smile and say, I'm just the man for the job.
Yeah.
Because you know who you are, you know what's worth fighting for, you know the tools in your belt, you have a strong, why, you know the people around you who are going to help you accomplish said mission, right? You're not alone, you have a tribe, and all of those things that make big things possible, right? We cannot do it on our own, and you have to establish not only that internal narrative, that plumb line, but then you've got to have the resources and people around you to keep on going.
Right. And our version of that is, what is the surprise of the day?
Yeah, I like it.
Because there's going to be one.
Yeah.
And you never know when it's coming or whatever. And so you go, okay, it's here. Now what?
Yeah.
And now we deal.
I love that. That's a great edit. That's a great way to really shift your mind in a moment.
Absolutely.
Right? Because quite often we get into this idea of, kind of that victim thinking, oh no, not another thing. But I'm gonna actually borrow that one as well, if you don't mind.
And a surprise is kind of like, ooh, it can be a really good thing.
There might be a president.
There might be a president there. And there always is a president there. And that's part of my opportunity is to find out what that president is.
Yes.
I love your attitude, for heaven's sakes. That's fantastic.
Well, thank you. Well, that's because his mom, we had dementia to deal with for 10 years. So we never knew what was going to come out of her mouth. We never knew what was, what phone calls we were going to be getting.
Yeah.
And what we had to
find
deal with.
humor in it.
So that was our first thing in the morning was, well, what's going to be the surprise of the day?
I think
Good
I'm
for
going to
you.
wake up saying that going forward.
Good
There
for
you go. And especially, with kids.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, there was always surprises, and some of them were really fun, and other ones were, but we still dealt with them, right? So
I just wrote that down.
Awesome. I know we could continue for a while.
Another hour or
We've got
two,
so
but-
many things in common and so much to share with each other. However, we're kind of at our, sweet spot here. So how can people, what would you like people to reach out to you for, and how can they reach you?
Yeah, thank you for asking, and thanks for having us. What a joy to meet both of you. You're just really, really genuine and delightful people here. This has been a joy for both of us. By the way, this is the first podcast that Lisa and I have done jointly. And
Your stars.
yeah.
maybe there'll be more.
This is the surprise of my day.
There you go,
Well, thank you for playing along.
and we're your present.
That's right.
It's been a nice
so,
present.
so to answer your question, again, if you're wanting to control energy, whether that's your home or, of course, office, you can visit statguardplus.com, or we have a new version called the Lockbox Pro, so you can go to lockboxpro.com. And then also, I'd love to, if you don't mind, just to talk about my Guardians of Grit book here just briefly. So this book is for fathers. The tagline of the book is Fathers Raising Uncrushable Sons. And
Cool.
I would love for you just to visit guardiansofgrit.com, where we just got the page quasi-launched last week, but you can sign up, for when we have kind of the soft launch. But we're going to be starting a community of men, and even their sons for that matter. We're going to be doing live events, and I really feel like the backbone of our world is when dads love and lead well and raise men who do likewise. You can trace every societal problem back to men. When men lead well, everybody wins. When men don't, everybody loses. And I'm really excited to start with dads, because I think that they're the bedrock, and I'm a bit biased, of course, but I'm pretty excited about that.
Well, and
Awesome.
it's a gift there again to be a father, right?
Yeah.
whether you have them not, however that person comes into your life,
Right.
even a pet, being responsible for that shows a whole different side of yourself and brings out things that you didn't even know, didn't you? Yeah. And what a joy.
Well, thanks for having us. This
Thank
is a
you
pleasure.
so much.
Thank
It's been a
you.
great pleasure, and we will look forward to another conversation at a future date.
Yes.
All right.
We'd love it.
See ya.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you.